So before I actually get started, I'm just going to give you all a bit of a heads up that this is going to be very different from the other talks that have been gone through today, because a couple weeks ago, Professor Johnson gave us the opportunity to do something a little bit different if we wanted to, in keeping with the philosophy of this institute, so that's what I'm going to be doing today. So like Professor Johnson said, my name is Tyler Valentine. I'm a rising fifth-year senior in the University of Washington Department of Earth and Space Sciences, and I've been spending the summer here at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics as a part of the Banneker and Aztlan Institute. And a large part of my summer has been spent working on research with Dr. Matthew Payne, where I've been studying the feasibility of sending a spacecraft to intercept an interstellar asteroid. And while that project was absolutely fascinating, I decided to do something a little bit different, because the Banneker and Aztlan Institute is a unique program because we examine how to operate at the intersection of academia and social justice. And so in keeping with the philosophy of that institute, I decided to craft a presentation around something that's been occupying my mind for a large part of this summer. In classes and workshops, we've learned a lot about things from racism and sexism and classism and talked about all those. And we've developed new skills and lenses to analyze the things that we're doing. And so I decided to take a look at the other research that I do outside of Banneker, which looks at space exploration and related sciences and technologies. And I decided to analyze those through the lens of justice. And I've come to realize that throughout the rest of my career, I'm going to be needing to keep a critical eye on the work that I'm doing and the industry's approach to space exploration and settlement. And in particular, I believe it's important to examine the promises offered by those seeking to exploit resources on asteroids, as well as the promises offered by those would-be space colonizers. And while space colonization is a hot topic right now, I want to first focus on the promises of the emerging space resource industry. During my last internship at Planetary Resources Incorporated, I had the chance to see and hear some of this messaging firsthand. And during my internship, Peter Marquez, who was the former vice president for global engagement, went to a Senate subcommittee meeting where they were discussing reopening the American frontier and exploring how the Outer Space Treaty could impact U.S. space commerce. And during that meeting, he shared one of the philosophies of planetary resources and their approach to extracting resources from asteroids. And he said that planetary resources exist to extract and utilize resources on asteroids that are needed for humanity to create a truly universal space economy, have a permanent presence in the solar system, and increase the quality of life for all people living on Earth. And this is a wonderful promise, but it contradicts with the reality that the quality of someone's life depends on far more than just the amount of material resources that are available to be consumed by society at large. But this idea reflects simply the Western capitalist lifestyle that has rapidly spread throughout the globe. And what this shows is that we have started to blur the line between a material good and a good life. And so what we're doing is hungrily consuming every resource that we can get our hands on, desperately hoping that that will improve our way of life. And through doing this, we have an insatiability that has caused us to enter into an ecological debt with the Earth. In a study published in 2011, it was found that humans, specifically those in developed nations, use more resources in a year than the Earth can possibly replenish. We tear down forests with abandon, and at the same time that we're dumping pollutants into the Earth. And while we're destroying the lungs of our planet, we're also blasting the tops off mountains and digging deep into the Earth's past to access hidden reserves of mineral resources and fossil fuels, just hoping that this will bring us closer to a good life. And so in keeping with this, planetary resources and deep space industries have sought to extract resources from every nook and cranny that the solar system has to offer, starting with asteroids. But if planetary resources or deep space industries are successful in extracting resources, can we really think that these resources will serve to benefit all of the people on this planet? Now, idealistically, yes, that would be fantastic. But again, that contradicts with our material reality. We as humans already use an unprecedented and extraordinary amount of resources, but these resources are not distributed collectively among us. And we can see that by the fact that the wealthy in Dubai have built a tower that pierces the sky. Yet on the other side of the world, the poorest of the Haitian people are forced to eat cakes made out of dirt, water, and salt to simply have something inside of their stomachs. And worse yet, just a few hundred miles to the north of Haiti, in the United States, we collectively waste over 150,000 tons of food every day. And so without addressing this underlying unequal, unjust, and inhumane distribution of the world's wealth, then space resources will not, in any sense of our imagination, serve to increase the quality of life of every human. It'll instead serve to only deepen the pockets of the ultra-wealthy, in particular, the space barons. The space bearers is an exclusive group of the ultra-wealthy made up of people like Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, and Elon Musk. And these are the men and the main individuals that are currently competing to colonize the cosmos. These space barons have attempted to justify their competition by asserting the importance of the survival of humanity, thus continuing the legacy left by their starry-eyed forebears. One of those forebears was the early rocketry pioneer Robert Goddard, who at one point said, "The navigation of interplanetary space must be effected to ensure the continuance of the race. And if we feel that evolution has reached its highest point in man, the continuance of life and progress must be the highest end and aim of humanity, and its cessation the greatest possible calamity." And there's a whole lot wrapped up in that one quote that I don't have time to unpack right now, from anthropocentrism and racism to simply arrogance. I just want to point to the fact that the modern rocket billionaires might not explicitly state that same anthropocentric view that white men are the pinnacle of evolution, but they certainly share the belief that humanity should expand throughout the solar system and colonize other worlds. They have been heralded as great humanists because of their purported desire to save humans from the extinction that awaits us if we stay on Earth. Because it is we have a very realistic impending danger from climate change, and there is an ever-present threat of an asteroid impact. So realistically, humanity could be easily wiped out if we stay on Earth, because there's no planet B. Unless, as Elon Musk and others would suggest, we go through the process to create a backup planet. However, it's important to ask ourselves a number of questions with this approach. Most importantly, the things I want to look at today is who will this process save and what portion of humanity will be preserved, because not everyone can go to that backup planet. So will these future space settlements truly reflect the diversity of humanity? I think not, if we continue in the approach that we have right now. After all of the astronauts of the Apollo era were white men. The vast majority of astronauts today continue to be white men, as are the CEOs of major aerospace corporations and the majority of their employees. And it is doubtful that this will change in the future without massive movements. As such, if or when Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos successfully create human settlements in orbit on the moon or on Mars, they will overwhelmingly be occupied by wealthy white people from so-called developed nations. And they will, in no sense of the imagination, reflect humanity, nor will they serve to save all of us and our various and diverse and beautiful cultures that are on this planet if an extinction event occurs. However, the space barons would lead us to believe that just like asteroid-derived resources, their ideas for space colonization will inherently serve to benefit all of humanity. And their pursuit is built upon a naive idealism informed by reading and watching far too much science fiction. Because if you base your ideas on nothing more than science fiction imagery, you can easily delude yourself that by creating massive space stations traveling the stars and sending humans throughout the galaxy, that we can automatically create an almost utopic society. However, by analyzing the promises of space explorations through the critical lens of justice, we come to realize that space settlement does not offer the answers to our earthly struggles. So what I've attempted to show you all today and describe to you all is that the current capitalist approach to space exploration is fraught with problems. But space exploration itself doesn't have to be inherently negative. But we simply need, those of us that are working in this community need to keep a critical eye on the work that we're doing and the way in which it can influence the future. And we also need to start proposing and coming up with alternative approaches to the individualism that we're taught to relish in through capitalism. And one of the alternative philosophies is one that came to us from the Zulu people and was described to the members of the Banneker Institute by Dr. Nia Amara, which is the Ubuntu philosophy. The Ubuntu philosophy can be described by 4 Zulu words: Ubuntu, Ungumuntu, Ungabane, Abantu. And those 4 words, when translated in English, give us the idea and teach us that a person is a person through other people. And so it's important that the Ubuntu philosophy asks us to realize that we would not be able to survive, let alone thrive, without our various communities and the people around us. And so instead of focusing our own individual needs and only those, it's important that we turn to the people sitting next to us and ask our neighbor what their needs are and ensure that we're putting those first before we focus on pursuing new capitalist pursuits. And with that, I would just like to acknowledge a few people Banneker and Aztlan leadership in particular, Dr. Niemeyer and Professor John Johnson for just being fabulous people that have constructed this program and all the various beautiful things we've learned throughout it, as well as the B4 family around us, as well as our peer and program mentors. And I give a special shout out to Dooney for just making sure our program can keep going, Jamila for being the dopest peer mentor ever, and my advisor, Dr. Matthew Payne. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns?
So I learned that this was going to be hot fire because of 4 little fire emojis. There's not an emoji that can capture the beauty of that talk.
Thank
you so much, Tyler, for the work that you put into that and for sharing your thoughts with us here today. What questions do we have for Tyler?
John?
I guess, do you have any thoughts on ways that things that the community can do now or are doing now that could take space exploration or like the idea of exploring space to be something that more than just the space bearings?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that's happening in our society right now that'll serve to benefit that is the Banneker and Aztlan Institute. If this program continues to grow and thrive the way it's doing right now, I think that the people that are around and affiliated with this program and go through it will be those people that are leading the forefront of these sort of movements that we need to actually make sure that space exploration and this a whole bunch of other things don't continue to fuck up the planet. So maybe I shouldn't say that. I'm just recording. Mike.
So I think we've heard a lot about all the ways that we're subject to these forces, whether it be capitalism and other means of exploitation. Can you give some examples of how some of these marginalized communities are resilient?
So Jamie did a good job touching on that during his presentation when he talked about the third way and the Haitian people. And so that's something that's happening right now where we're seeing third ways cropping up in those, all the language that's used to describe those countries that describe it. So the previously colonized countries are coming up with those third ways, and we see it in the fact that they had those armed revolutions earlier, just a couple decades ago. And so the resiliency we see is that they're creating these third ways, and then in places like Ghana, where they come up with when Kwame Nkrumah first took office as the first president of the newly independent Ghana, he was able to institute these socialist programs and really come up with really good and efficient two 5-year plans and a 7-year plan that would have made Ghana a force to be reckoned with, really. But then there was a whole military coup thing that went on, as tends to happen. So there's a lot of ways that people are resilient, I guess. I don't know if that necessarily answers the question directly.
All right, well, let's thank Tyler and all of today's speakers.
Thank you.